Welcome, CEOs. I am Hermione Olivia, and I invite you to cherish every opportunity to connect the dots. CEO Yourself was created as a destination for motivation and to inspire you wherever you are on your journey to become the CEO of your life. Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
It took me about 5.5 years for that to actually sort of hit me. And I remember I just sort of said to myself one day, I make incredibly rich men richer. That's what I do, day in, day out. And I was sort of like, how is that useful? What is the purpose? If I wasn't doing this, they're still rich. So, what am I doing? And found that as women, we're great at saving. But when it comes to investing for various reasons, we're just not doing enough. But that has huge implications for us later on in life. The gender pension gap in the UK is 40%. So it's double the pay gap, doesn't get anywhere near as much airtime. But what it means is, for a lot of women, when they get to later in life, they won't have enough money to see them through. I want to stay in the realm where we're helping women and by giving them financial guidance. So in terms of how much someone should be investing, generally the way that I look at it is, before you really get going with investing, you need to have your emergency fund saved up.
Ayesha Ofori is the founder and CEO of Propelle, the investment app for women. On this week's episode of CEO Yourself, we deep dive her CEO superpower, relentlessness. Ayesha, welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thank you.
It's such an honour to have you here. You are on a mission to close the 1.65 trillion gender investment gap in the UK.
Absolutely.
Hence launching Propelle last month, the investment app for women.
Yep.
Why are you so passionate about supporting women in finance?
So many reasons. I think for me, the idea really stemmed from my previous background. So I used to work in finance. I was a banker for 10 years, but the last sort of 6 years of my career, I was an ultra high net wealth advisor at Goldman Sachs. And I was there for 6 years, and our clients were predominantly men. And it took me about 5.5 years for that to actually sort of hit me. And I remember I just sort of said to myself one day, I make incredibly rich men richer. That's what I do, day in, day out. And I was sort of like, how is that useful? What is the purpose? If I wasn't doing this, they're still rich. So, what am I doing? And then I sort of said to myself, and where are the women? Why don't we have, that many female clients? And I started to look across the board at the retail end as well. And I found that it was the same. Overwhelmingly, women weren't investing. So then I started to dig a bit, went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and found that as women, we're great at saving. But when it comes to investing for various reasons, we're just not doing enough. But that has huge implications for us later on in life. The gender pension gap in the UK is 40%. So it's double the pay gap, doesn't get anywhere near as much airtime. But what it means is, for a lot of women, when they get to later in life, they won't have enough money to see them through. So to me, it's almost like, a massive accident kind of waiting to happen, but nobody seemed to be doing anything about it, or nothing meaningful. And then when I looked at it, I sort of said, well, if women started investing earlier, and then if you invest over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you can actually build up substantial wealth over that time. And you don't have to invest a lot. The beauty of investing is in the compounding, so in how you earn interest on the money that you do invest. And it's an exponential line, so it's not a straight line. So you just need to get into the habit of doing it and start as early as possible. And you can absolutely change your life, or at least have a big impact on your life. So when I sort of saw all of that, I was like, why is no one doing anything? And it was actually my husband who was the one to sort of give me that push. He was just sort of saying to me you're always moaning about this thing. It's like, either do something about it or just shut up. And I was like, yeah, sure, I will. But in my head, I was like, I have no idea how to start a company. I'm a banker. But for me, I sort of said to myself, I feel like this is what I'm meant to do. It's sort of like when, it sounds very cliche, but all the stars align and you just feel that you're on the right path and you're meant to do something. I knew that this is what I'm meant to do. So I jumped in and said, right, whatever I don't know, I'll learn. I will find people who are experts in things that I'm not an expert in, and I will build the business that way.
Have you discovered why women don't invest?
So there are several reasons. The biggest one is lack of confidence. So we doubt ourselves. So even when we do know something about investing, we sort of question, is it the right thing? Is there something else that I don't know? Or am I going to make a mistake? That kind of thing. And the interesting thing that we found at Propelle is it doesn't matter the level of the woman's sort of financial sophistication. We found that women across the board lack confidence. So we spoke to women at big financial services firms, hedge funds. They felt exactly the same as women that we spoke to, for example, in the NHS. And that was really surprising to us because we sort of felt like, well, you guys work in financial services. Why are you not on top of this? So that was really interesting. So just across the board, women doubt themselves when it comes to investing, and just it's sort of like, oh, I'm not 100% sure, so I don't know if I'm going to do it, and then, or I'll do it later, and then later never happens. So that's one of the reasons.
Is there any correlation with the way that we spend, the way we use our money, and the fact that we're not prioritizing it, or is it just that we don't have the confidence to?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that as women, we tend to be the sort of carers, the providers, so we kind of put everybody and everything else sort of before ourselves. So like, even if I think of myself and my children and my family, I always do for them first. And then it's sort of like, right, is there anything left to invest? So I think for women, our disposable costs tend to be quite high, particularly if we have children. So oftentimes there isn't that much left to invest. That said, you know, you can start investing and open an ISA with £1. And I know that a lot of women probably think, well, you know, investing is for the wealthy, or if I don't have a lot of money, what's the point? There really is a point. Even if you only had £5, £10, whatever it is, over time, it can make a huge difference. And then aside from confidence, we also found that women think about risk in a different way to men. So for example, women are what I call more risk aware. So in order for them to feel comfortable about a certain investment that has a certain level of risk, you have to give them a lot of information. Once they have all that information about the investment, they might still go ahead, but at least then they're making an informed decision. If they feel that they haven't got the information or they can't make an informed decision, they're least likely to do it. Whereas men, on the other hand, will kind of just jump in and say, I'll figure it out later, or let's just see what happens. Women are least likely to do that, which means that in a lot of cases, men start investing and then their money's in the market and it's working. And then, you know, they've already got over that first hurdle. It's already doing something. Whereas women will hold back and say, no, don't think I've quite got it. So no, not going to do anything. So spending time helping women to sort of understand risk, understand their own risk, what it means to investments and investing is really important as well. And then I say the third thing is just community, just talking about money. You know, women haven't historically been the ones that are having these sorts of conversations. You know, my husband has WhatsApp groups where he talks to his guy friends like, oh, who's doing, you know, X, Y, Z. And I think that really stems back to the fact that, you know, even in this country, I think it was 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, but not that long ago. I was definitely, you know, it wasn't too long ago when, you know, women needed their husband's permission to buy property. And I mean, for me, I'm like, that's crazy. I'm like, my mum was alive then. It's not that long ago. And so if we're coming from situations where, you know, we weren't the ones in control, we had to have permission to do certain things, then it's not a surprise that we lack confidence. But it can change. It has to change. And that's one of the things that we focus on at Propelle.
So how does Propelle support providing that information for women when there are restrictions around what advice you can give?
Yeah, so this is an interesting topic and something that frustrates me sometimes. So actually, in the world of investing, in order to give financial advice, you have to be regulated by the financial body. And in the UK, that's called the FCA. If you give financial advice and you're not regulated, you can get into trouble. But you're allowed to give financial guidance. And the difference is financial advice is very tailored and specific to one individual. Whereas financial guidance is more, I'm going to help you by giving you information. I'm going to kind of guide you, but ultimately you'll make the decisions yourself. And that's what we do at Propelle. We give women financial guidance. We do it through courses, blogs, quizzes, content, online, in person. We've built financial tools. We will hold your hand and guide you, but ultimately you need to sort of take those final decisions yourself. But the interesting thing is there are a lot of, I don't know, they're called finfluencers online and sort of people now talking about investing and you know, all these things. And a lot of them really bug me because they can say anything. it's almost as if they don't really sort of care about the rules and regulations. And up until yesterday, the FCA weren't really doing anything about it. But the FCA actually came out yesterday and said, I think there are a number of influencers who are actually being interviewed under caution, and they said, we're actually going to start taking this seriously, which for me is huge. And it's so important because I think today a lot of us are online, and and that is how we consume a lot of information, particularly for women as well. So if you're getting information from somebody who isn't, regulated or doesn't have the experience or the expertise, then they could be telling you things that could cause you to lose money. And as women, because we are so aware about the risks from the beginning, I think in those cases it really doesn't help. So I welcome the FCA's intervention. I was like, finally, about time. Because at Propelle, before we can put anything out, the amount of checking and due diligence and compliance sort of processes and procedures we have to go through before we can put even a social media post out is just insane. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So I think it's good that the quality of content out there should get better now.
I currently invest with Vanguard, which is obviously a great platform, relatively easy to use, but doesn't feel aligned with me at all. Why would I move over to Propelle? What are the perks and benefits?
So I love Vanguard too. They're one of the fund managers that we work with. So on the Propelle platform, you can choose from 7 funds to invest in currently, 3 of which are provided by Vanguard. I spent a lot of time researching and actually working with some of my ex-colleagues to really figure out and understand which fund managers that I wanted to work with on the Propelle platform. That those decisions weren't made lightly. And we chose Vanguard because, in my opinion, they are one of the best. But I guess to your question, why would women come to Propelle and not go directly to Vanguard? I think it's because of everything else that we offer. It's the education, it's the way we deliver it, the sort of bite-sized content, it's the community, getting to come to Propelle events and meet other women and maybe find accountability partners, or joining our online webinars and learning about different topics that you might never have heard about. I don't know, like we did one in the past on how to leverage your clothes as an asset class. So there are women out there renting out their wardrobes and in some cases making a lot of money, which you can then invest into other things. So things like that, you're just not going to get from a traditional provider. And I think in my view, just the way that we live today and the way that we interact with companies is much more sort of personalized. And you want to know, who is behind the company and you want to sort of feel part of it. I think it's very difficult to do with big established firms. That said, still like their products, which is why we have them on the Propelle platform.
For the listener out there who has perhaps never invested a dime in their lives and wants to start, what is your advice about where to start? How much? How regularly?
So I'd say one of the hurdles is just starting. So what I would actually say is whatever the minimum amount is for you that you could feel comfortable losing, start with that and open. For me, the most sort of vanilla or the investment with the lowest sort of hurdles is an ISA. If you invest in an ISA, and when I say an ISA, I mean a stocks and shares ISA, not a cash ISA. Holding a cash ISA in my mind is saving, whereas a stocks and shares ISA is investing. So if you were to open a stocks and shares ISA, for example, the minimum amount you can open them with is £1. So even if you open it with £1 or £5 or £10, at least you've started. And what that means is you would have gone through that whole process. You would have started to see some of the jargon, start to understand some of the words, the information, and you get a feel for it. And once you get a feel for it and you get comfortable with, it's working in the way that you expected, then you can start investing some more money. So when women sort of say to me, I just don't know where to start, or I don't have enough money to start, it's just not true. You can start with £1.
What's the maximum you can invest in an ISA?
So there's an annual allowance of £20,000. So up till that level, it's tax-free. You can invest more if you want to, but it kind of doesn't make any sense if you are trying to maximize that tax allowance. So each tax year, you can invest up to £20,000 in an ISA. And they actually changed the rules earlier this year. Previously, if you worked with one ISA provider, you wouldn't have been able to work with any others. But they changed the rules this year. So now you can open as many ISAs as you like. So that was another one of the questions I always got asked. Oh, I have an ISA with whoever. Oh, I can't open a Propelle ISA. I'm like, you can now because you can have as many as you like.
But the total has to be
The
up to
total is
20,000.
still up to £20,000, but you could spread that £20,000 between 20 providers if you wanted to.
Are you able to advise on what percentage of your income is recommended to be investing?
So I never give advice. As I mentioned, we don't have the license to give advice, and that's deliberate. I want to stay in the realm where we're helping women and by giving them financial guidance. So in terms of how much someone should be investing, generally the way that I look at it is before you really get going with investing, you need to have your emergency fund saved up. So that is a sum of money that is for your rainy day. It could be you lose your job or something happened or, I don't know, you're in a relationship and you need to get away. It's just a sum of money that is for an emergency. Generally speaking, I think you need to have at least a good chunk of that, if not all of it, kind of put away in cash, so in a cash ISA, so somewhere where you can access it easily. Once you've got that, then I'd say you can really start focusing more on investing and sort of building wealth. It's kind of like making sure, if you're building a house, you've got to make sure the foundations are right before you start actually building the house. So having that savings pot is making sure you've got good foundations. And the size of that emergency fund really depends on the individual. Some people say it needs to be sort of 3 to 6 months of living expenses, but everyone's living expenses are different. Depending on what role you're working, it might be a bit harder for you to find a job if you did lose your current one. So maybe then you'd want to maybe have 12 months of living expenses. But the crucial thing is your emergency fund shouldn't be too big. With women, we find that they hold far too much cash. So once you've got to that sum, whatever it is, then you start to think about investing. And in terms of like how much of your income should then go towards the investing, I say it really, again, depends on sort of yourself and how you want to live. So if you've got your emergency fund saved up, you get a salary every month, you pay all of your expenses and your bills, I say absolutely keep some money for yourself for fun because, you know, life is for living. But then anything that's left, you could start investing that. I think what a lot of women do is they put it back into the savings pot, and that's the thing that has to change. Once your savings pot is of a sufficient side, move to your investing pot because the returns that you get on that pot is very different to what you would expect from a savings pot.
What other fun tricks and tips have you come up with along the way as to ways women can find fun ways to seek out cash within their means? Like, for example, you said women are renting out their wardrobes.
Yep.
Are there other fun ways, you know, with your accountability partner that you can find ways in the month to save money or accrue more wealth that you can invest? So
I think one thing that comes up often is a lot of women these days are sort of starting side hustles around their passions. And sometimes women sort of say, oh, I don't know, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing that I can sort of start my side hustle on. But I'm like, most of us have a passion about something. And just given the way that the internet works today and everything is online, there are usually ways that you can sort of monetize your passion. So for those women who sort of say, do you know what, I've got a little bit saved, but month to month, my expenses, you know, basically take everything that I earn every month. I don't have anything to invest. And I do say to them, you know, maybe you could consider a side hustle. And then any money you kind of are able to make from there, then you can start investing that. And it could be anything. I don't know, maybe you like to knit and you could start, you know, something online about that. And I know that sounds like really random, but I actually love to knit and I crochet. It's one of the bizarre things that I like to do in my spare time. So I follow people online who knit and they're clearly making money from it because they've got a lot of followers.
You chose the CEO superpower, relentlessness. Talk to us about why you chose that.
Yeah, so it was a really interesting thing to think about. And also I looked at some of the other podcast episodes you'd done and I looked at other of the other superpowers. And so I really thought about, okay, what is it that really, I guess, sort of describes me and who I am? I've debated whether or not I was going to share this, but it does actually answer the question. And the reason I'm debating whether I was going to share it is because I guess depending on how you look at it, some people might see it as a positive or negative, but I will share it. And this is the first time that I've done this publicly. So when I was at business school, It was coming up towards, I think it was graduation, and they did this, most likely to, and everyone had a most likely to do this, that, or the other. And mine was most likely to win the Hunger Games. And I was really upset because when I heard it, I was like, isn't that the program with the game where the whole point is to kill everybody so that you're the last person standing? I was like, that is terrible. And I was like, is that what you guys think of me? And I was really upset. And then they kind of explained it and they were like, no, we don't mean it in that way. We just mean it in that whatever you set out to do, you will make sure you find a path to do it. You're so relentless. And when I thought about it in that way, I was like, actually, they're right. And I've always been like that ever since I was a child. When I decide to do something, I will move heaven and earth to make sure that it happens. And I generally won't stop. And that's when it can potentially become a negative thing, because sometimes you need to know when to stop something. But because I'm always like, no, I'm going to achieve that. I said, I'm going to do that. I'm not stopping until I get there. And I've always had that sort of relentlessness.
And you had to use it to create Propelle.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Every single day. Running a startup is hard.
But there were a number of people telling you that this would never happen.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't needed.
Yeah, still, even today.
Were they mostly men saying that?
Yep, absolutely. So when I started Propelle, initially it was just a community. And then I think it was sort of beginning of 2022, a lot of the women in the community were saying, okay, you've been running these events and talking to us about investing, but now we actually need to invest. And I said, well, there are loads of investment platforms out there. Why don't you use them? Like, there are loads of them. And they're like, no, they don't resonate, or I don't like it because of this, that, and the other. And then when I kind of tied that in with the data, I was like, actually, women do want to invest. There are lots of investment platforms out there, but they're not using them. That's not a coincidence. So then I realized, and that was my light bulb moment, I need to build an investment platform for women. But to do that, I need a team, I need engineers, I need money. So I went out to fundraise, so to raise money from whether it be VC funds or individuals. And it was impossibly difficult. I knew the statistics around female founders not getting funded. I think something like 2% of female founders, probably a bit less, get VC funding. And if you're a black woman, it's 0.02%, so basically zero. Despite knowing my chances were so small, again, I was like, nope, I'm going to do this. There is a way. I'll figure it out. I don't know the way yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And when I started going and approaching people, the fact is majority of the money or the investment sort of funds in this country are controlled by men. So when I was having those sorts of conversations, it was sort of like, oh no, women don't want to invest. If they wanted to invest, they'd be using the platforms that are out there. There's nothing stopping them. I even had one guy like, well, my wife doesn't invest. I do everything. So no, I don't think, women would need this. I'm like, your wife is one woman. I don't think her opinions or her behavior can necessarily be replicated across every single other woman in the country. It became incredibly frustrating. I do have some male investors, and they are absolutely fantastic, and they are our allies, but majority of the money that I've raised for Propelle has come from women. And so far we've raised £1.2 million, and majority of that is from women, and everyday women who've built businesses. In some cases, it were women who have never invested before, but they were like, I love this. I want to be part of this. And so this will be my first investment. Some are serial investors. Some are what I think are quite well-known businesswomen who have built their businesses. They've been successful, and this is their way to be part of something that they really believe in. But if it wasn't for women, I wouldn't have been able to raise the money to even get to where we are today.
Thank you for swinging that statistic the right way. Hopefully it continues to shift.
Absolutely.
So let's get granular with relentlessness.
Yep.
How can you share your experiences in your incredible career with our audience and apply it to relentlessness? How can we be more relentless?
I think it's easier when you find something that you're passionate about. If you find something that you're passionate about, you naturally have an inclination to want to keep moving towards that thing. And I think I mentioned it earlier with Propelle. I feel it inside me that this is what I'm meant to do. And that helps me because there are some days where it's actually really tough and I'm sort of like, oh gosh, how the hell are we going to get through X, Y, Z? And then I say to myself, we'll find a way because I know I'm meant to do this. So I know I'm meant to be on this path. So do you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it because I know that it's going to happen. And then I just keep going. So my philosophy is everyone has luck, but in order to maximize your luck or to make sure that when your luck shows up, you can capitalize on that opportunity, you have to be at that point. So therefore, you've got to chase every single opportunity. And I do that in all cases, again, sort of coming back to that relentlessness. It's about just keeping going. But again, if it's tied to your passion, it's much easier to do. And I'd also say that a bit of competitiveness helps. I'm quite a competitive person. I always have been ever since I was a child. So again, that sort of helps me to sort of keep going. But I say the big thing is that we're never going to be sort of like 100% every day. It's okay to have down days. The crucial thing is to pick yourself back up and to keep going. You are going to drop balls. Again, it's absolutely fine. But what I say is try to drop the balls that bounce, and then just keep going.
That's an amazing quote. And you're doing all of this with young children as well.
Yes, I've got 2 kids, 2 and 7, and life is busy.
What's your advice for the woman out there who has maybe an incredible sturdy job like you did in finance and little kids about pivoting to pursue your passion?
So I will be very frank and open. I got myself to a point where I was financially secure before I left Goldman Sachs. So I had started investing in real estate personally when I was still working. And I built up a sizable portfolio with my husband that gave me the financial stability to be able to leave. For me, that was important. I didn't kind of just want to like jump out the plane and not have a parachute at all. So I wanted to build something up. And that was also something else that helped me to start Propelle, because I was sort of like, I started investing in this portfolio and I almost stumbled across property investing. I've managed to start investing to build it to this stage where I can now leave my job and I don't have to worry about, you know, how am I going to pay bills or things like that. And then I remember at that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to share this with other women. Like, this is great. So for me, it was important to have that sort of financial stability. But I mentioned that already when I mentioned the emergency fund earlier. So I think it is important to have an element of financial stability before you kind of make that leap. If you're brave enough to do it without, I mean, kudos to you, but I absolutely wasn't. And I think if you have kids, that need to have some sort of stability is just really, really important.
Critical. Now, let me ask you, what is your legacy piece of advice?
So there's a quote that I love, and I'm pretty sure it's a Nike quote, and it goes something like, it's only crazy until you do it.
Just like you have.
Yeah, I sort of think of that and I think of Propelle, but I've always been like that. I remember as a child, my mum made an offhand comment once about how she had really wanted a son. And if she'd had a son, she would have wanted him to be an airline pilot. And I remember saying, I can fly a plane. I mean, I hadn't at that point, but I'm like, why do you need to be a boy to fly a plane? So I then begged for pilot lessons, and then I saved up, and then I started learning how to fly.
Of course you did.
Because I'm like, you don't tell me I can't fly a plane. And it was similar when I went to university. And I was deciding what I wanted to study. And I was thinking of doing maths because numbers just came really easily to me, and have always done. And then one of my teachers was sort of said, oh yeah, you should definitely do maths. You know, a lot of boys tend to do physics, which is applied maths, but I think, yeah, maths is better for girls. I said, are you telling me I can't do physics? I'm like, where do I sign? So I ended up going to Imperial College and I studied physics. Yeah, I don't like being told not to do things. And the crazier it is, the better.
You'll be off to space next, I know it.
I did actually want to do that once too. So,
Ayesha, where can the listener find you and Propelle?
So I am on social media, so predominantly LinkedIn and Instagram. And you can just, for my own, it's Ayesha.Ofori. And for Propelle, it's @Propelle or with Propelle on Instagram.
Congratulations. I can't wait to roll over.
Thank you so much.
It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.